Imagine for a moment two big burly men on either side of a long pole, and in between there, this large bundle of huge, beautiful, succulent grapes. Now, to a different scene, totally different story. Imagine this large bush that's on fire, beautiful fire with light like you've never seen it before. Fire with colors that you can barely even imagine or see. Now, both these images immediately bring to mind two very specific Bible stories. The story of entering and searching out the promised land, and the story of the burning bush. It's amazing how different images like these are prevalent in so many different Christian art pieces, because these singular images bring to mind entire stories, entire narratives, entire chapters of the Bible, sometimes even more. And the reason why this does this is because if you can remember just small portions in your true memory where you can just immediately recall this story or that story or these main points, the chunks that we did earlier, if you can remember this flows to this, and how it flows between, your real memory, your true memory, can fill in the rest. And so, one of the great ways to work on learning a Bible story is to first chunk it. I always chunk my stories first, which, if you don't know what that means, go back to the previous video. And then I will do some way to internalize it. And one way is to draw either symbols, or if you're really artistic, you can draw a lot more detailed with some time. And or you can even do something as simple as stick figures. This is about a seventh of the Sermon on the Mount. See the salt and the light in the top right? There's a lot of chunks in this story. It's a nightmare to memorize. But even simply doing this, even just stick figures, has helped me remember a good portion of it already. And you can do that with any story. You want to pick symbols and or pictures that help you recall the biggest chunks. So like you take the most important part and you get a picture of it. Or you take one or two of the things that you don't think you'll remember right and you visualize it or do some kind of symbol to represent that, to remind you, hey, don't forget this. And you can even start by telling it while using the pictures, and then eventually you want to put the pictures aside and tell it without using the paper, which is scary. But it's a great way, and it's one of the ways that's been very effective for me. Like when I learned the Passover, which has, or well, the Lord's Supper, which has about 7 chunks. We did that, but we also word outlined. So sometimes it helps a lot if you can use different methods in combination rather than just relying on a single memory hook. If you can get as many memory hooks into it as possible. Sometimes there's even natural memory hooks within the story to help you remember, such as the story of creation, which is deceptively difficult to learn. The first 3, you have the beginning, and then you have the first 3 days. And the first 3 days match up with the last 3 with the next 3 days. So day 1 matches with day 4 on the content. And the same with 2 and 5 and 3 and 6. The creation of the land, and then the creation of the land animals and the... But it's really cool how that matches up. And then you just have to really remember these 3, and then you can immediately remember the other 3. But that leads me to one final thought, which is another cool storying technique is to use memory hooks. Such as in the very first video, I repeated the phrase, that favorite binky. And hopefully even just that phrase recalls that entire story. Sometimes we even see these directly with Bible stories, ingrained in the stories themselves, such as the story of, which I've always referred to as Mice and Tumors, where the Philistines, not the Philistines, the foreign country has captured the Ark of the Covenant. And, oh, it is the Philistines? My wife is telling me it is the Philistines. Where the Philistines have captured the Ark of the Covenant. And repeatedly throughout that story, there's this phrase, the hand of the Lord was heavy upon the land. The hand of the Lord was heavy upon the land, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and it even is there with the Israelites because they're treating the Ark of the Covenant wrong. But those different memory hooks, those repeated phrases, if you can get them into a story, and it's appropriate, you don't want to add them if it doesn't really fit. If it takes away from the story, you definitely don't. But especially if they're already there, they're really useful if you can catch those repeated phrases and do something with them. Like, remember to repeat them in a way that it's fresh every time you say it, or it's building on the last times you've said it. Whether by getting quieter or getting louder. But these are all ways that we can work on remembering stories and also making them more memorable. So, I would encourage you to take a story, maybe one you're a little familiar with or one you're not familiar with at all, and first chunk it, and then draw simple, even just stick figures of each of those different chunks. And then tell it to a friend. Even if you use the pictures at first, that's a great way to start. And tell it a few times like that, but then eventually put it away and tell it without the pictures. Good luck.